Sawadee Cup, hello and welcome to another Victor Black Masterclass video. In today's video, we are going to be exploring the mythology behind the Multi Ester Compound. So let's get started with today's video. Okay, so just by way of introduction for anyone that isn't aware of what a Multi Ester Compound is, back in the days when doctors refused to basically support self-administration for testosterone replacement therapy, there was a time where you were really expected to go into the doctor's office and have your 200 milligrams or whatever they basically deemed appropriate for you administered by the doctor in himself in his own practice. And very often that was then a consequence of basically having to go into the office every 2 weeks, and you were administered the total amount of testosterone at that point in time, and there was obviously a corresponding rise and fall in serum testosterone levels. Hopefully most people have kind of seen the graphics that I quite regularly show. Let me just pull one up here that shows that, something like this. So this is a graphical representation of the pharmacology of testosterone enanthate, and it shows a dramatically sharp peak at the beginning of administration, literally within days of administration, that then slowly tapers off and falls to a low. This is what we would call a peak and a trough, and there has been a significant amount of investment in terms of multi-ester compounds trying to address this issue, trying to basically come up with a solution that basically provided a smoother delivery of hormones over a longer time frame of administration. And that's the premise, that's the idea behind multi-ester compounds. So in principle, let me just go back to the graphic I want to start with here. In principle, what multi-ester compounds are supposed to do is contain a number of different esters. Some of them contain 2 esters, some of them 3, some of them 4. The most famous of these is probably a product called Sustanon, which is what we're looking at now. It's a blend of 4 different esters. And the idea is that each of these esters have a peak, and by combining them together in the same file, we basically have 4 different peaks over an extended time frame, which then would provide for a smoother delivery. So this makes absolute sense. I'm not too tough on guys that don't understand this. This is still bro science, and I'm going to explain it to you, but I do have a degree of empathy about why people think this, because this was a strategy that was investigated and researched, certainly. The realities of it is what we're going to talk about today. The realities of it don't line up with the concept, with the idea behind it. And again, even today in 2018, a lot of guys missed the boat on the development and the application research that followed, and the understanding and the realization that this doesn't work. All right, so people are still talking about Sustanon. People are still talking about multi-blend esters with other compounds, with this idea that basically, rather than kind of like having to administer with relatively high frequency, you can put multiple esters together, 2, 3, 4 different types of esters together, and have a smoother delivery over a longer time frame. Many people still believe this, and I want to explain to you why this simply isn't true. Okay, and so therefore we're going to talk about what you should do at the end of this video. So let's basically just talk about why this isn't true. The reality is that when you look at the pharmacology of various testosterone esters, they all fundamentally respond in the same way, which is there is an initial sharp release of hormones that results in a peak serum level days after administration. It doesn't matter which ester we're talking about. It doesn't kind of like hang around for 3 or 4 or 5 days and then start working. That's not how these things work, okay? So what we're looking at here is a graphical representation of just 2 esters to try and keep this nice and simple. This is a product called testovirin, and it's basically comparing, it's a blend rather of testosterone enanthate and testosterone propionate. The challenge is, as you can see, is the initial peak concentration of testosterone following administration. They both peak almost immediately, within days. There's this idea that, well, because it's testosterone enanthate, we're going to have this peak of propionate here, and then sometime later we're going to see the enanthate peak. That's the mythology. That's the misunderstanding that guys have. That was the idea behind multi-ester testosterones and multi-ester compounds, but it doesn't work that way. In reality, all esters follow the same pharmacology, the same pharmacokinetic profiles, where you have an immediate high release of compounds in the bloodstream, so you have a high peak, and then basically they tail off. So when you put them all in a bottle together, nothing really happens. It doesn't work, in other words, right? So I just want to show you a couple of different profiles. As I said, so this is the pharmacokinetics profile of a single dose of testosterone enanthate. As you can see, an initial high peak followed off into a tail over a time frame of, say, 20 days. If we compare that, as I said, to propionate, as an initial high peak followed off. Now the difference is that, and I'll show the difference between the two esters, is propionate has delivered its entire area under the curve within, let's say, 6 days, within a week. So its total capacity to do work is kind of realized within a week time frame, whereas the enanthate ester, as you can see, takes a longer period of time to do that. The challenge is that the initial peaks line up together. They're not staggered to each other, all right? So this idea that, if I go back to this initial graphic, this idea that you have these peaks that occur at certain timelines as you go down from our like administration point to, like, 1 week, 2 week, it doesn't work that way. That's not what happens in reality. Okay, so does this apply to other compounds? You will see today multi-ester compounds in all manner of different products, from Masteron, Primobolan, Nandrolone. There's really no limit. Even Trembolone, I've seen Trembolone in ester mixes today. The reality is that it doesn't work that way, guys. Okay, this is an idea that didn't pan out, right? And unfortunately, we're hanging on to it as a belief system. Okay, so what do we need to do? What's a practical takeaway for us in this instance? Well, the first thing to understand is that, as I said, when we used to, and I'll just show you this. Let me show you this before I carry on. This is in reality what Sustanon, this blend of 4 esters, looks like in reality. You have an initial high peak of serum testosterone levels that then tail off. You don't have multiple peaks. Okay, this is the reality of blending esters together. Okay, so what's a practical takeaway for us as users? Really, it's this. When, as I said, administration was really, about being in the doctor's office every 14 days and having the doctor administer your 200 milligrams or whatever he was going to give you, this discussion held a lot of weight, right? It was a meaningful discussion, and any potential advantage that might be gleaned out of, even a small advantage out of ester choices, was credible and was relevant. But today, 2018, we're no longer basically living in the world of doctor-only administered protocols. All right, most doctors, in fact, I don't know anyone today that doesn't allow patient administration. Okay, and certainly if you're talking about recreational use of performance-enhancing drugs, and I'm in that category. I'm not technically a TRT user. I use steroids. Right. I have a great degree of control over how and when I can administer these compounds. And so the reality is that, what was meaningful over like a discussion about, I'm going to have a shot every 14 days, that was a meaningful, credible, and valid discussion. Becomes completely mute if you're going to administer 2 to 3 times a week. It's just meaningless. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some technically small, correct sort of difference between esters. Let's say, for example, if you look at, say the C and the E ester, which are very common middle range esters for testosterone, they're not identical to each other, but they are so close to each other in pharmacokinetic profiles that for all intents purposes, for 99.9% of all discussions you're ever going to have on this subject, you can consider them to be identical. Okay? So, does it matter which one you choose? No. Does it matter if you want to use a longer ester? No. Does it matter if you want to use a shorter ester? No. What I recommend that you do is you basically gravitate to, surprise, surprise, the middle ground, right? So a C or an E ester, and administer 2 to 3 times a week. Now, if you can't get either of those, or if you have some Sustanon laying around, or you have some test propionate, then great, use that. Does the administration frequency change? Not in my opinion. You should still be doing like 3 times a week ideally. Why? Because we want to have nice smooth blood levels. We want to avoid high peaks and high troughs. So if you administer 3 times a week, which is really what we're saying is every other day, all right? It doesn't matter what ester you choose, and it certainly doesn't matter if there's multiple esters in that vial. It makes no difference, okay? So please understand, don't be drawn in by this idea of like you have to use that ester or you have to use this ester or there's some advantage or disadvantage indeed to multi-ester blends. There isn't any, okay? I tend to gravitate towards middle esters, E's, C's, right? But I would have absolutely no issue with using Sustanon. If someone wanted to give me some pharma grade Sustanon for free, would I use it? Absolutely. There's no disadvantage to using it, provided you use it on the same administration protocol, which is basically, I wouldn't change that. And so this idea of having multiple esters makes absolutely no difference to me whatsoever. Technically, you can sit there all day and have some, like nerded out sort of cerebral masturbation about the difference between esters, but in reality, under, self-administration protocols, under administration every second day or 2 times a week, it makes no difference. All right. So I hope that clears up the mythology behind multi-ester compounds. That they make no difference to our application, none whatsoever. It was an interesting and valid discussion that was premised on the idea that if you're going to have a shot every 2 weeks, all right, then blending esters together might provide some delivery advantages in that domain. That's what it was premised on, not our best practice application today. So it is completely and totally minutia. Just forget about it and move on to other things that are more important. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Victor Black Masterclass. Sawadee Ka.